Well, Brian Kelly, I don't know if the man sleeps. He has been absolutely tearing up the recruiting trail, and LSU landed two major commitments over the weekend. Who are they, and what can they bring to the 2023 class? All of that and more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, whatever you like to use. You can find us there. You can also find us on YouTube as well. If you're watching the stream, you can check out my nice little farmer's tan that I got yesterday. You can check us out on YouTube at Locked on LSU. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get notified as soon as the podcast drop and you do not miss a single second of your Locked on LSU content. I'm Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host. I'm a LSU graduate, diehard LSU fan, and I now host Sports Talk Radio in Nashville on ESPN 1025 The Game. And Brian Kelly has been wasting no time to build up some heavy hitters in the 2023 recruiting class. LSU landed two major recruits over the weekend. So I want to look at exactly who they are, what is LSU getting, why is it such a big deal, and what can they bring to the future of this team. But first and foremost, Trey Holly. So it's been one of the biggest promises, I guess, from the Brian Kelly coaching staff that is going to be their highest priority when recruiting is keeping players in state, keeping all of the really talented players in Louisiana and have them come to LSU. They're calling it recruit the boot. We know boys from the boot, for example, back from the Les Miles and Nick Saban eras, that they want to keep in-state talent in state. And that is exactly what they did with Trey Holly, a four-star running back out of Farmerville, Louisiana, Union Parish running back. I mean, this kid, what can't he do? My goodness, this man is just an absolute monster at the position. Just to list off his accolades, Louisiana Class 3A Offensive Player of the Year in 2020 and 2021. I mean, I had to double, triple, and quadruple check these numbers just to make sure that they were accurate because they are out of this world numbers that I couldn't even wrap my mind around that a human being could do this. In 2021, he had 2,815 rushing yards, 34 touchdowns, and 320 carries in his junior season alone. He has over 7,000 yards throughout his entire playing career in high school. I mean, this guy, the team is absolutely on his back. They had back-to-back state championships. And I say throughout his high school football career, he was playing high school football before he was even in high school. He started on the varsity team as an 8th grader. And, you could say, he was on the team and he dressed and he practiced. No. He contributed and actually had a monster season at 13 years old, ran for 849 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 137 carries, and also got it done in the air as well. Had 122 receiving yards on 7 receptions and 2 touchdowns receiving. I mean, this kid has been absolutely lining it up in Union Parish. And he said that was one of his biggest commitments one of his biggest priorities, was to stay in Louisiana. He wanted to stay home. And that just adds to Brian Kelly's commitment to also keep those players in Louisiana. Now, the interesting thing about Trey Holly is I've seen him listed at 5'7", 177. I've seen him listed at 5'8", 180. Let's just round up 5'8", 180. That's not an overly large running back. He's not, a big time physical. He is physical, but he's not a big time sized running back. I mean, 5'8", 180 is a fairly small guy. I mean, when you look at like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, for example, in the Coach Ed Orgeron system, but typically Brian Kelly running backs are much larger, much more big bodied. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he's utilized utilizing Trey Holly, who is so much more of a smaller back, but is such a physical and quick runner. But exactly what can he contribute to LSU? Because we can talk about him all day long and what he was able to do in high school, but what he's able to do in high school may not necessarily translate to college level. But what exactly can he bring to LSU? So you're looking in at 2022, the running back room is pretty stacked. You got John Emery, Noah Kane, a transfer in from Penn State, got Amani Goodwin, you got Trey Bradford, Josh Williams will also contribute. But if you look at John Emery, he's in his final year. Noah Kane could leave for the NFL draft this year, most likely will. Armani Goodwin, Trey Bradford, Josh Williams, they're kind of at the bottom of this running back hierarchy. And they could leave. I mean, we saw Corey Kiner, for example, transfer to Cincinnati because he didn't see an opportunity to start within this running back room. So if those three kind of bottom of the totem pole running backs decide to stick it out at LSU, then great. But also wouldn't necessarily blame them for trying to go somewhere else if it was more of a straight shot to competing and to starting. And I mean, there's so much turnover at the running back position, more so than really any other position, just because they need to get in right now. So, I mean, we don't know exactly what the 2023 room will look like, but you're going to see John Emery make his exit. So adding depth and adding just a really, really talented player in Trey Holly is going to be huge for this running back room. And I said it, but keeping him in Louisiana is such a wonderful trend moving forward. I mean, he had offers from Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Florida State, Tennessee, Southern Cal, TCU. I mean, these other football powerhouses across the country. It kind of seemed like he had essentially the pick of the litter of these really talented blue blood juggernaut programs in college football, and he decided to stay in Louisiana. So I know that it was a concern of mine going into this new Brian Kelly era of how will players in Louisiana kind of adapt and take to Brian Kelly, a coach that never coached below the Mason-Dixon line before. But I think we're kind of seeing here the trend of players in Louisiana wanting to stay at LSU, and that trend is only going to continue if they keep up what they've been doing. But coming up next, another big-time recruit that will be joining the 2023 class, and kind of just an overall broad scope of what exactly this 23 class is looking like. We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell y'all about Built Bar, because I had a birthday cake puff for breakfast this morning. And imagine, close your eyes, you're sitting at your birthday party and you're dipping your finger into a tub of birthday cake frosting, a big old bite of birthday cake, and then you open your eyes and you realize that it's not actually cake. It's really actually good for you. It only has 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That's exactly what it's like eating a birthday cake puff from Built. Every day can be your birthday with a birthday cake puff. Like I said, I had one this morning, and they're really unlike anything I've had before. They're incredibly soft, very light. They're not overly heavy. They're available right now, and I cannot promise you that they're going to be there tomorrow because they are so delicious, and I'll probably order another box. So get them today while you can at Built.com. And if you haven't tried the puffs, I have to tell you, as a friend, let you in on a little bit of a secret. They are delicious. They're a chocolate-covered protein marshmallow. So if you like marshmallows, this is going to be the perfect thing for you. You can get your marshmallow fix and also have it good for you as well. 16 grams of protein, only 9 grams of sugar. Ditch the marshmallows, ditch your dessert, and do a Built Bar instead. It's a limited time flavor, and it's an amazing option if you're looking a healthy way to get that sweet tooth and to kind of satisfy that sweet craving throughout your day. All the Built Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. The birthday cake ones are covered in white chocolate, and they are delicious, and you actually enjoy eating healthy. And they're also made with collagen protein, which is great for your body. Your body absorbs it more efficiently, has a ton of health benefits. I know it's great for your hair, great for your nails, great for your skin. So if you've been struggling to kind of grow your hair out or to grow really strong nails, this collagen protein is going to be perfect for you. So go to Built.com and get the birthday cake puffs now. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Well, we talk about how important it is to keep these players in Louisiana, to keep the players from Baton Rouge and New Orleans and Farmerville and Shreveport, so on and so forth, keep those guys going to LSU. But it's also almost equally important to make sure that you're covering your bases across the country as well. And that is exactly what Brian Kelly and this recruiting staff did with their new commit and four-star defensive back, Daylen Austin from California. So he currently is ranked as the 143rd overall player in this 2023 class and the number 16 corner in this 2023 class. So he kind of rounds out, he is that sixth member of LSU's 2023 class to join. So exactly who is Daylen Austin and what can he bring to LSU? My first question whenever I saw that he was coming to LSU was, why LSU exactly? Coming from California, having offers across the SEC, across the Big Ten, across the Pac-12. Why exactly did he want to make LSU his landing spot? So he visited back in mid-April. This was before the spring game. He said he wanted to be very strategic, actually, and not come for the spring game because he wanted his one-on-one time with the coaches. He didn't want to be one of many recruits. He wanted to have his quality time with the coaching staff and sitting on practice. So, I mean, wonderful strategy by him. Worked out. But he said when he visited back in mid-April, he wanted to make his decision right there, that once he was in Baton Rouge, he knew that he wanted to make this place his home. He said, I gave the coaches my commitment on that trip, and I wasn't sure when I would go public with that decision, but the timing felt right to do it now. He said, LSU was home. I got that family vibe right away and knew that's where I wanted to be. I love everything about the school and can't imagine a better fit all around. So I think the important thing for me there is we know that these players in Louisiana, Trey Holly, for example, and we've heard it from so many in-state recruits from past and present, that LSU is home. I want to stay at home. Trey Holly mentioned, how much better could it be than to have all of my friends and family in Tiger Stadium at week in and week out. They get to see me play in person. It's not a culture shock to leave Louisiana. It's more of a comfort level. We hear so many in-state recruits that it feels like home. Hearing a player from California say that Baton Rouge just felt like home, that this coaching staff brought him in and made him feel so at home, I think is such a huge thing in terms of national recruiting. In-state recruiting is so important, but you've got plenty of talent in Texas, in California, in Georgia, in Alabama, and all across the United States. So being able to make LSU and being able to make this LSU football program attractive to players from all over, I think is huge. And that's one thing that really stood out to me. He said that his number one goal, of course, is to make it to the NFL. And he wanted to go somewhere that would set him up for the most success to do that. And he cited that LSU is DBU. He said, my goal is to play in the NFL and they've got more defensive backs drafted than any other school. And that's what he look, I could follow in the footsteps of so many defensive backs that are starting on Sundays, and that's what I want to do. And we talk so much about how important it is. For example, a few months ago, I chatted about the Super Bowl, having so many LSU Tigers in the Super Bowl, having Joe Burrow on, the biggest stage in football. That's huge for recruiting. And I think that this just goes to show how important that is, how important it is for a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid how confusing this decision might be to go where you don't know where is going to be the best landing spot for you, but being able to see people who have done it before at LSU, I think is so incredibly valuable. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have players like Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry, for example, that are in the news now signing with the New Orleans Saints. That there are going to be wide receivers and safeties that are coming up there out of high school saying, that's what I want to do. That's where I want to be. So I think that is also such a huge key part of this recruitment, is just how much success LSU's had in the NFL. He says, that's my dream for sure, and I think that they can help me get there. That's another big thing there as well, because this is a new coaching staff. So for him to be able to compare his experience at LSU in recruiting with so many other more established coaching staffs in college football and being able to look at LSU and say they can get me to the NFL is huge. I mean, Robert Steeples, new cornerbacks coach for this year. I mean, he's new. I mean, this is his first year at LSU, and he felt so confident that LSU could be the school to get him there. So I think, just overall really good signs for this recruiting class moving up. But who is he? What does he bring? What can he contribute to this team, both in 2023 and in the future? So the number one takeaway is this guy is speedy. This guy can move his feet. He ran a 10.8 200-meter dash this spring. And I was kind of poking around 24/7 Sports that his comp was Patrick Surtain out of Alabama, who was drafted in the first round. Really speedy guy, really long-bodied corner. So getting a lot of speed out of him, and they really cannot have enough corners. I mean, he is the fourth defensive back commitment in this 2023 class, 6 total. So, that's huge, right? Excuse me, I think he's the third defensive back in this 2023 class. Yeah, you're looking at safety Ryan Yates out of Texas, another safety Michael Doherty out of Georgia, committed in this 2023 class. You truly can never have enough defensive backs. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see 2, 3, even 4 more corners and defensive backs sign in this 2023 class. But rounding out the 2023 class, of course, you've got Trey Holly, running back out of Louisiana, joining the ranks this past weekend. Daylen Austin, 4-star corner out of California, joining the group. We've also got hometown kid, Louisiana kid, Omarion Miller, wide receiver, Mac Markway, tight end, and like I said, safety Ryan Yates out of Texas, and safety out of Georgia, Michael Doherty. All of them are 4-star prospects. So I know that we are all looking forward to the 2022 season, but Brian Kelly has kept it on for the future as well. So 2023 class looking really, really bright as is. But coming up next, the biggest name in this 2023 class has yet to decide where he is going to end up. Where is Arch Manning on the move to? I talked to John Garcia of Sports Illustrated last week, going to break down what he said and kind of some new things that we've heard from Arch Manning since then. Get into that coming up next. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you about Bet Online, because there are partners that continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. They've got the latest odds. They've got news and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. Looking at the Bills as Super Bowl favorites next year, I would look at sprinkling some money on that because it's got a pretty solid return. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information. They've got live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So LSU adding on 2 more 4-star prospects in their 2023 class. Great for the 2023 season. Great for the 2023 recruiting class. But that big heavy hitters in that recruiting class have yet to decide where they're going to go. Most notably, Arch Manning. Of course, in-state kid, quarterback at Newman. But his entire recruiting process has been so under lock and key. We haven't heard much from Arch Manning. We've heard the schools, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, associated with him most closely. But we really don't know exactly what he's thinking. You can drop hints here and there, but I asked John Garcia, who is a senior insider of recruiting at Sports Illustrated, I asked him, what exactly is Arch Manning looking for a landing spot? What are some of his priorities? What are some of his non-negotiables? What is something that he is looking at for an eventual landing spot? And this is what John Garcia had to say.
Going to say no or try to rush Arch Manning. So that could, one, extend his timeline and, alter some of the priorities in his recruitment. He certainly is looking for that true high-end professional organizational atmosphere. He wants an NFL type of system. And obviously Brian Kelly's been linked to the NFL for, it seems like, a decade at this point. So I do think that if they could get him on campus, that would be a positive in the presentation. They want stability. They want a program that could either maintain its status near the top, which is, Alabama, Georgia makes a lot of sense, or one that is clearly on the up and up. And I think that's where Texas, maybe an LSU and a Florida can actually factor into this recruitment.
So a couple things there. The first thing that stood out to me is he's looking for a really organized system. What have we heard so much about Brian Kelly? He's the CEO of practice. The way that we've looked at LSU football in the past is going to be completely different. It's so much more refined. It's so much more organized. In practice, it's not as chaotic or sporadic. Everything is very regimented and everything is very planned out. So that kind of organizational and NFL type style of team. And that's absolutely where Brian Kelly and LSU fit in. He talks about kind of this NFL system. Not only has LSU produced so many players in the NFL, but Brian Kelly has as well. And throughout his entire tenure as a coach, he's produced so many players into the NFL. So I think you can look at his resume and being able to produce NFL talent, and also his resume in terms of style, and that fits exactly what Arch Manning is looking for. Organized, refined, regimented, pro-style type of team. I think that would fit Brian Kelly and this new LSU football regime very well. I look at the word stability, and I think that's kind of a tough one to peg on LSU, just because this is a new coaching staff. Now, John Garcia, and if you want to listen to that episode that's uploaded on all the podcast platforms on YouTube as well, so you can hear exactly what John Garcia had to say, not just about Arch Manning, but about recruits across the country, is that he's open to a new coaching staff. You know, he's not married to a very established coach or an established coaching system, that he is open to that. But I look at the word stability, and I don't know if I would describe LSU as the most stable program right now, just because it is a new coaching staff. Of course, he is open to that. But if you look at Kirby Smart at Georgia, he'll likely be there a while. Nick Saban at Alabama, I mean, that's the definition of stability. So he's looking at those two schools. And if you want to compare the stability of LSU, I don't think it necessarily ranks up there with Georgia and Alabama. So that's one thing that I've kind of been looking at. But then again, John Garcia said he's okay with a new coaching staff. He's open to that. And if he can kind of see that organization and that CEO of practice mentality that Brian Kelly has, he could be convinced that this is a program that is poised for stability and success moving on into the future. But he spoke with On3 last week. And that was really the first that at least I have heard from Arch Manning directly from him being so candid about exactly what he's looking for. And he spoke on Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, three teams he's highly considering, also planning visits to LSU and Florida. So LSU is in the mix of things. But I read what he had to say about Georgia, and this is what he said. I love Coach Kirby Smart. He's a really normal guy, a great coach. Georgia, the takeaway from practice there is that they have athletes all over the field, especially on the defensive line. They have some studs, and it shows. They had 15 players drafted. Athens is probably the best college town I've ever been to. The coaches are all good people. They know how to win. They know what it takes, and it was cool seeing that. So, of course, he's a Manning, and he's not going to divulge too much information. He's not going to give too much of a peek behind the curtain of exactly what he's thinking. But reading that entire article and kind of hearing how he spoke about all the different schools that he has visited, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia, Georgia really seemed to have the most passion behind it. Said it's the best college town that he had ever been to. So I really, in my completely unbiased, unprofessional opinion only, this means nothing, that has no merit to it. It seems like he really likes Georgia. But I think that there's an element of being close to home and of being able to be in this NFL system that could appeal to him. He mentions Georgia had 15 players drafted, but LSU had 10. LSU had the second most, only behind Georgia, in a down year. So if he's looking at the number of players drafted at Georgia, I mean, just look at the past few years at LSU, and that absolutely exceeds that. But it'll be interesting to kind of follow what Arch Manning is doing. John Garcia mentioned he is in no rush whatsoever, which I think works in LSU's favor. So if Arch Manning is able to get into an official visit in Baton Rouge, which I can only assume that he's going to, he mentioned that he wants to visit LSU in Florida, that he'll be able to get in there and see this type of system and can be completely overwhelmed with the amount of NFL success from this team. So we'll monitor Arch Manning moving forward. And also moving forward, a new segment that we'll have every week on Locked On LSU is the Recruit of the Week. So we did a full recruitment episode today. We're going to continue to do that throughout the summer. I'll pick one recruit, whether that's a commit, whether that's a player that LSU is targeting, whether that's a player that's really hot on the recruiting trail across the SEC, across college football in general. We'll be breaking them down, what they can do for LSU, who they are, where their talents lie, and how they contribute to the LSU Tigers. But that is going to do it for me today. Appreciate you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. And make your second listen Locked On SEC. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts.